It looks like a land of plenty. These people are making only just enough to survive. Land and power in Pakistan often go together. People are fed up and angry too, and they blame a ruling elite they see as corrupt and self-serving. Might economic issues help the Taliban to create chaos? There's no escaping the Taliban's logic. If your life can scarcely get worse, maybe we can make it better.
Their message is that there is a lot of injustice that has been committed, and we will give you land, we will look after you, we will be the empowered future. Join us and be a part of the future. That is what they say.
It's been called the Switzerland of Asia. For centuries, it was a remote mountain kingdom run by a traditional ruling family. Until 1969, Swat wasn't fully part of Pakistan. It was just left to its own devices. And it was peaceful. Famous for its trout fishing. A place for honeymooners and tourists. Its lack of economic development, part of its charm. But more recently, Swat has been a war zone. Pakistan's armed forces moved in to fight the Taliban, who campaigned here for Islamic law to be introduced. They wanted to live according to the rules laid down by the Quran. And at first, the Taliban enjoyed some support. People were so tired of the state's failure to provide schools and functioning courts, they thought maybe the Taliban could do better. In fact, things got worse. The Taliban fighters imposed their puritanical views with violence. And most people didn't like it. This man says he was one of those fighters. He's now been detained by the army, and he freely describes his own brutality.
What sort of people were these who you slaughtered?
There were 2 teachers, DVD shopkeepers, army spies, and a policeman. I knew 2 of them. They used to bring them to me at night.
How actually did you kill these people?
They gave me a knife and told me to use that. Their mouths were gagged, so they could not talk. I just said, God is great, and killed them.
That kind of extraordinary violence has put people off the Taliban. Hermit and Izzat Begum are war widows. Their husbands, policemen, killed confronting the Taliban. It's now virtually impossible for them to provide for their children. The Taliban ruined Swat, she says, and the other adds, we're widows with no money. This is the Taliban's Islam. The Taliban did kill many policemen in Swat, but many soldiers died here too. The Pakistan Army here is honouring the memory of those soldiers who died in the campaign against the Taliban in Swat. The army deployed tens of thousands of soldiers here, and they did prevail. But the Taliban haven't entirely gone away, and just over the last few weeks, there have been targeted assassinations by the Taliban of community leaders here. Swati children portray the Taliban takeover and the army's response. It's a year now since the military retook Swat from the militants. A victory shown here as hard-fought, welcome and complete. And the audience seem to agree. The Taliban are shown as violent aggressors hell-bent on power.
I order all pro-Talibans to start an endless war against them. Take your weapons with you and row Pakistan army out of Swat.
The Taliban stopped women from working and girls from going to school.
Will I not be able to go to school again? Will I not become a doctor, as it is my ambition in life to be a doctor?
This is all part of a hearts and minds campaign being run by the Pakistan army. It wants its fallen soldiers seen as martyrs who fought for their nation's freedom. The army chief has repeatedly said he can only fight the Taliban if he has broad public support. And the Taliban has been exposed as dictatorial and cruel, which prompts the question, how come they won so much support in the first place? Part of the answer lies in this rubble. This used to be the home of Muzaffar-ul-Mulk, a member of the Pakistani parliament and a landowner in Swat. Land and power in Pakistan often go together. Influence passed from one generation to the next. And he says that's one of the reasons his home was targeted by a Taliban-led jealous underclass.
This happened in the name of religion, but the Taliban took advantage of it to get land and property from the wealthy.
The houses of leading politicians and landowners have been destroyed throughout the Swat Valley. And the Taliban here had appeal for a number of different reasons. There was the anti-Americanism coming out of the invasion of Afghanistan nearby, and also the failure of the Pakistani state to provide justice and education. But there was another reason. Some of the dispossessed around here were trying to overthrow the established order. The self-confessed Taliban slaughterer was a typical recruit, uneducated and poor, fated to remain as underprivileged as his parents. The idea of change was exciting.
The Taliban wanted to get the landholders' property and to snatch their homes. They wanted to kill the landowners, and then everything would be with us. With Islamic law, everything would have been with us.
Today, there are Pakistani flags on every shopfront in Swat, a symbol of allegiance to the Pakistani state. But the economic and social issues that the Taliban exploited have not gone away.
The Taliban is a romantic movement. They are groups of Robin Hoods. Their message is that there is a lot of injustice that has been committed, and we will give you land, we will look after you, we will be the empowered future. Join us and be a part of the future. That is what they say.
In the Punjabi capital, Lahore, religion could scarcely look more different from the Taliban's Puritanism. Pakistan's poor have for centuries found solace in an intense and mystical expression of their faith, Sufi Islam. But the Taliban say this is sacrilegious. This kind of religious practice is being challenged by a number of conservative mosques and seminaries in Punjab. A few years ago, there were just a few hundred. Now, there are several thousand. Some Sufi leaders see the network of hardline religious institutions as a potential militant infrastructure. And they fear the hardliners might combine their good organisation and their economic message and drive these people into the arms of the Taliban. A Away from the mountains of Swat, it's harvest time in Punjab, Pakistan's richest and most fertile and most powerful province. It looks like a land of plenty, but most of these farmers actually have fewer than 10 acres. So might economic issues like those in Swat help the Taliban to create chaos in Pakistan's heartland as well? Zafar Abbas and Makbul Bibi expect their 7 children to help bring in the harvest. And they say most people in their community don't know where their next meal is coming from.
We live in poverty. How can we meet our needs? Inflation is killing us and our land is too small to earn enough. People end up stealing and go to prison. But what choice do they have?
And for scavengers with no land at all, it's a question of living on the leftovers. A few grains of wheat to make some bread. There's little chance of these children ever going to school. Pakistan needs at least 19 million new school places just to cope with the existing population. It is state failure on a massive scale. And these people are making only just enough to survive.
Politicians only think of themselves. They want to get money for themselves to set up factories and to get good jobs for their children. The children of the poor, even educated ones, are wandering the streets, jobless.
There is real despair in rural Pakistan. Virtually every day the newspapers carry stories about people driven to suicide by poverty. This man's son, Nawaz Mohammed, was a 30-year-old with 7 children when he decided there was no way he could repay the money he had borrowed from his employer. He gathered his last few rupees, sent his children to buy some sweets from the market, and whilst they were away, hanged himself. My son couldn't cope with the poverty, he says. He didn't say anything to me or to his family. He just killed himself. He was fed up. He couldn't get his creditors off his back, and he couldn't pay them either. The rich don't know how much they have, he says, and the poor are dying of hunger. So what do you do if you can't feed, never mind educate your children? Well, for many Pakistani families, the answer is to send them to Islamic seminaries or madrasas. They have the great advantage of offering board and lodging free. Madrasas are often described as jihadi factories. But in fact, in this one in Lahore, the teachers last year denounced the Taliban as un-Islamic. The response was swift. A suicide bomber came here and killed the mullah in charge of this madrasa. He was buried in the courtyard, and the police are now deployed at the madrasa's gate to keep the Taliban at bay. Westerners tend to see madrasas only in terms of religious indoctrination, but like students the world over, the boys here also discuss more worldly matters. The situation these days just hurts the poor, they say, with flour and electricity prices being so high. People can't look after their children's needs. And one says it's frustrating because our government hasn't followed the Islamic rules for governing the country and distributing wealth. If they did follow Islamic concepts, he says, this wouldn't happen. While the deprived complain, the wealthy worry.
Anyway, I thought that in 20,000 bucks a horse that has won 100.
Meet Key Guy, Abida Hussein's Texan thoroughbred.
and he's extremely well bred.
The leading farming families in Pakistan are generally described as feudals. The Taliban denounce the feudals as greedy, decadent exploiters of the common man. And the feudals have little doubt where that argument will lead.
Well, you see, the mullahs will say, oh, these big bad feudals, what did they give you? What did they give you? What did they do for you? You're poor, and we'll give you land. We'll give you water. We'll give you milk and honey will flow through the rivers. You will inherit paradise on earth. And if your kid blows himself up, he will go straight to heaven. So it is land grab.
As a prominent member of an influential family, Abida Hussain is expected to take an interest in the problems of people in her area. It's all part of the traditional way of doing politics in Pakistan, the poor petitioning the rich. But others are trying to get in on the act. The man dispensing favours here is Mohammed Ahmed Ludhianvi, the leader of the SSP, an organisation banned by the UK and Pakistani governments as a terrorist outfit. He operates in the town of Jang in central Punjab. For years it's been associated with Shia-Sunni sectarian violence. But some of Jang's militants are moving on from sectarianism and joining the Taliban instead. Ludhianvi makes speeches and moves about with armed guards quite openly. The situation in Punjab is complicated by the close links between some elements of the state and some of the militant groups. For his part, Mohammed Ahmed Ludhianvi simply denies the overwhelming evidence of his organisation's militancy.
I don't understand it. Our interior minister sits in Islamabad saying these things about us to please God knows whom. I would like to challenge him through you. If there is any evidence we have been involved in terrorist activities, I will take whatever punishment is prescribed.
Despite those claims of innocence, it all begs the question: how come the state allows the leader of a banned organisation to go about his political business with so few restrictions? But those who ask questions like that need protection.
Don't look at the governments. Governments never come to fight extremists. They come at the end. When the
Sheikh Waqas Akram, a member of parliament from Jang, is a vocal critic of the SSP. He survived several assassination attempts. He makes his money in transport, petrol stations and flour mills. The feudals tend to dismiss Pakistan's emerging business elite as new money. But for all their rivalries, the ruling class in fact has a shared interest in the existing order. And he says the state simply doesn't understand what it's up against in Punjab.
There is a lack of understanding of the issues on ground. And the understanding should be that these people are potential threat for Punjab and for Pakistan. We might face another Swat in any other district in Punjab any time if we don't put an end to them.
There have already been major attacks in Punjab, most notably on the Sri Lankan cricket team whilst it was on tour here. The police, the military and the offices of intelligence agencies have also been targeted. The state has been unable to break up the networks of suicide bombers and their handlers. And it's now rumoured that many militants on the run from the northwest have fled to Punjab to lie low. Even when the state does manage to capture suspected militants who carry out attacks, it's often incapable of putting them behind bars. At the prosecutor's office in Lahore, there's lots to be done, but they get bogged down by the bureaucracy. This prosecutor says over half the cases he puts through the anti-terrorist courts eventually end up with acquittal.
The fear of the terrorists was so organized that looms large in the hearts of the witnesses. The terrorists, they were able to blow up the witnesses, their families, their relations, just to give a message across to the witnesses again, so that nobody comes up as evidence against the terrorists. For example, they have been able to kill a few senior police officers as well.
On the streets, the people protest. This riot is about power cuts, but so many things are in short supply now. Electricity, water, gas, food. People are fed up and angry too. And they blame a ruling elite they see as corrupt and self-serving. Many Pakistanis are facing a crisis of confidence. They're worrying about the future, quite uncertain what it will hold. Normally, it's the journalists who get accused of hyperbole by the politicians. In Punjab, it's the other way round. The man in charge of running Punjab is predicting revolution.
Today, people feel that those in high offices are having the best of both the worlds, but they go without energy, they go without water, they go without medicine. This can't go for a longer period of time. This revolution is knocking at our door.
Pakistan's ruling class is rattled, unsure that it has the answers to the country's economic and security problems. Now, Pakistan has defied many previous predictions of imminent collapse, but there's no escaping the Taliban's logic. If your life can scarcely get worse, maybe we can make it better. It all comes down to how well the government can counter that argument.
No militancy movement can succeed against a strong institutional state. Although they may have their ups along the line, but they will ultimately weaken down. And the message for any state is to reform and look at the critique which the militants are giving or the Taliban are giving.
The Taliban's attempt at a revolution in Swat failed, and people are now trying to get back to normal. But the Taliban have resilience. The day after we filmed these pictures, a suicide bomber killed 6 people here. The civil war raging in northwest Pakistan is far from over. The question now is whether the Taliban's appeal to the poor will resonate in other parts of the country and allow them to expand their campaign.